Okay, tonight is the first presidential debate of the 2020 elections, and I think we're all going to need a big, stiff drink to help us get us through this evening. Now, neither Trump nor Biden are drinkers, so we're going to go back to 1960, which was the first televised presidential debate in American history, for inspiration. And of course, that was between Richard Milhouse Nixon and John F. Kennedy, both of whom were prodigious drinkers. Now, as it turns out, that wasn't their first debate. Actually, 13 years earlier, as rising stars in their party and freshman congressmen, they'd gone up to a place just outside of Pittsburgh and had a debate on labor policy. And in a sign of how different those times were, they actually shared a sleeping cabin on the way back on the train, on the Amtrak on the way back, and they flipped a coin to see who had the upper bunk. Different times, right? Now, Nixon, by 1960, he had the upper hand, right? He was the sitting vice president. He was a nationally known guy, and Kennedy really wasn't, despite being a war hero and having a best-selling book, Profiles in Courage, right? And it was because of those reasons that Nixon's advisors were vehemently opposed to him debating on national television with Kennedy and said, hey, you got everything to lose and you got nothing to gain. But Nixon overruled them, and he was a confident debater, he was a very skilled debater, but he also had a nose for history and realized that this was going to be a historical moment. Now, and history it did make, right? That first presidential debate pulled a 59.5 share. That means 59.5% of TV households, meaning if you owned a TV, right? Not if you had it turned on. Owned a TV were tuned into this debate and was on all three networks at the time, right? So it was amazing, and it was only bested by subsequent debates in October. So, and those remain for the top 5 presidential debates according to ratings. Of course, there's bigger audiences now because America's nearly twice the population. But, so what happened in that first debate? Well, it was really as Nixon's advisors feared. Kennedy was tan, rested, and ready. He had spent the afternoon in the Chicago hotel listening to Peggy Lee records, and he came out in a sharp, dark suit, and his performance was stellar. Came out loaded for bear. In sharp contrast, Nixon was exhausted. He had campaigned all day. He was tired. He was wan, and he also had a serious knee injury, and so he was in tremendous pain. And worst of all, he wore a light gray suit. It's the last time any presidential candidate wears a light gray suit, right? And so he looked terrible, and Kennedy's performance really was stellar. So, what did these gentlemen drink? Well, Nixon, being in California, was a big onophile, and he was a serious onophile, and he loved first growth French Bordeaux's. But he was also a stingy bastard, and what he would do is he would serve pedestrian plunk to all his guests, and his stewards would wrap his first growth, he loved Chateau Margaux, they'd hide it in a serviette and he would serve himself, just for his own private little stash. Tricky dick indeed, right? Now, Kennedy, on the other hand, was a playboy, very much a social drinker and a trendy drinker. He loved daiquiris, he loved Heineken beer, he loved German beers. But more than anything, he loved a Bloody Mary, and that's what we're going to make tonight. So, now, his Bloody Mary was really more of the cocktails, probably closer to Harry's New York Bar in Paris, which was a much simpler fare than the vegetable salads that we get for our Sunday brunches, which I love, by the way, but these are much more simpler, what Kennedy was knocking back. First of all, it was served in a Collins glass or something much smaller. It wasn't a 20-ounce monstrosity. And Harry's recipe calls for 2 ounces of tomato juice, 2 ounces of vodka, juice of a half of a lime that's freshly squeezed, salt, pepper, and a little cayenne pepper to taste. Pre-mixed all that there. And you want to stir that around and get it nice and cold. Now you'll note that this is a bottle of gin here. So I've substituted the gin for vodka. When you do that, it's called a red snapper. I don't know why it's called a red snapper. I couldn't figure that out. I guess somebody just changed the name. They didn't like the word Bloody Mary, but that's what it's called, a red snapper. Oh, sorry, I forgot one of the most important parts, which is the Worcestershire. So we're going to add a couple of dashes to that, and then stir it around yet again. All right, and then we're going to strain it into a Collins glass with fresh ice there. And there you have a red snapper a la Bloody Mary. No garnish, no nothing else. So I'd like to cheers or raise a toast to my former boss, former Vice President Biden. May the debate tonight, may your performance in the debate tonight be as decisive as your Irish Catholic brethren, Jack Kennedy, was 60 years ago this month. Cheers. That is delicious.